We've been doing some things with slope and tangent lines, and I wanted you to see in terms of a graph how the slope and tangent lines and derivatives and how they all compare. So here we have a graph of f of x, and I labeled some points there, and I want to talk about the derivatives. Remember that the f with the little line, it's called the f prime. Those all stand for derivatives. Basically, those derivatives are standing for the slope. So first thing I want to do is I just want to identify the slope, like if it's positive, if it's negative, or if it's zero. So here's A. If I draw a tangent line, this tangent line would have a positive slope at A, so f prime of A is positive. B, I think B is supposed to be at the top of this curve, and so if it was at the top, the slope of the tangent line at B would be 0. E would have a negative slope because when I draw the tangent line, I'm going down. C would also be 0. You know what? I labeled these wrong. E would be negative. C would be 0. And then if I go to D, D is going to come out to be positive because of that tangent line. Sorry about that labeling there. Now, another thing that it might ask you to do is to put the derivatives in order from least to greatest. And when you do that, you don't actually have to find the tangent lines. You just have to compare them and figure out which one would come first and next and so on. So I know that if both of these are 0, they're going to come first, and it doesn't matter which one you would put first if they're both 0. Well, negative actually would come before that, so you'd have f prime of E, and then f prime of B, f prime of C. Then we have to compare what's going on at A and at D. And so what you need to do is just draw a tangent line best that you can at A and at D, and just kind of look at it and see which one's bigger. Well, f prime of A is going to be less because it's not quite so steep. D is much more steep. So f prime of A would be next, and then f prime of D. So you might have to label whether it's positive, negative, or 0. And then you might have to put it in order based on what the slopes actually were. Now, if B was actually not 0, B would also be negative or positive, and it would be really, really small. So if I had to compare B and C, B would just be a small positive number, so it would be right after C. I know that's hard to look at, but that's what that would be doing on that graph. So let's look at another graph. On this graph, I can identify, okay, A is going to be negative. I've already actually drawn or indicated what the tangent line would look like with these dotted lines. Same thing with B. I've already drawn the tangent line. I know that A is going to be negative. I know that B is going to be positive. But this question might actually ask you to estimate the actual derivative. Figure out what the derivative would be if I had to estimate it. And what you do is you use the lines that they give you, if there is a line. I tried to give us one here to help us figure out that slope pretty easily. But you have to figure out the slope based on the line that's given. So on A, well, here's one of the points. And so I have to look at the line and I have to find another point on the line that I can figure out slope for. And so that point right there would work. And if you notice, we're going down 2 and over 1. So it's rise over run. So f prime of A would be negative 2 because it's down 2 and then to the right 1, so just a positive 1. If I estimated the slope on A, I would start here maybe and here. You could also go to here, any of those points, but just some points on the line. So here I'm going up 2 and over 2. If I went from here, I'd go up 1 and over 1. What that means is that f prime of B, I'm going to estimate to be 1. When you estimate, you just need to find 2 points on the line and just estimate using the slope. Okay, let's look at one more picture here. Now on this picture, I have three things that I want to look at. And what I want to do is I want to put them in order. I will tell you that all of them are positive. Okay? Now, this, f of 2 minus f of 0 from 2 to 0, that represents the slope between 2 and 0. Slope between 2 and 0. Because that's representing the change of 2 and 0 over 2 minus 0. That's the y's minus the x's on the top and the bottom. So if I wanted to think about that, here's 0, here's 2, and maybe I would just draw a line between them to see what the slope would look like. So maybe the pink there represents the slope between 2 and 0. Okay, f of 3 minus f of 2 actually represents the slope between 3 and 2, because if I divided that by 3 minus 2, well, that's dividing by 1, so that is also the slope between 3 and 2. So here's 2 and 3, so maybe that would look like the blue one. Okay, then it says the slope at 3. It has the derivative at 3. So what I have to do there is I have to go to 3 and draw what the slope would look like. So 1, 2, 3, it would be here. That's supposed to be, I think, at the top of the point. And if I drew that one, that's going to be flat because that's 0. And then the last one says f prime of 2. So f prime of 2 just means go to 2, and then I'm going to draw that line. And I know my lines are getting ready to be confusing. So I'm just going to kind of draw it maybe dotted like so I can see it a little bit better. Alright, so if I'm putting that in order, everything's positive except for the yellow. Yellow was f prime of 3, so I know f prime of 3 is first. And then I just want to think about how steep it is. So I have the blue, the purple, and the pink. It looks like the blue is less steep, so it's f of 3 minus f of 2 over 3 minus 2. And then it looks like this purple dotted one would be next. That's f prime of 2. And then it looks like the pink one is the greatest. And that would be f of 2 minus f of 0 over 2 minus 0. And there's what that would look like if I put those in order. So if you have to estimate, just do your best based on what it looks like. If you have to put them in order, think about drawing those lines and think about how steep they are. And if it says f prime, that just means the slope at that point.